afternoon, guys. It's Stacia here. I just wanted to get on here and be obedient. God's been calling on my heart lately to do a testimony, and I just feel like now's the time. God's saying there are hurting people all over right now, and it's time to share your story for those who don't know. So when I grew up and we lived poor. To give you an example, we ate out of dumpsters. You know, my mom struggled. We didn't eat out of dumpsters every day, but my mom struggled to be able to provide for us, and we all had different fathers, and most of them were gone. My mom struggled. She had 6 kids, and I was the middle of those 6. I have an older brother and 5 sisters. And growing up, man, I just remember struggling from a young age. I remember we lived on welfare. You know, my mom signed up for all of the the free things that you could get, which is great. You know, she's using her resources that she could. But like the angel trees and the food pantries and things like that, we depended a lot on those types of services. And then my mom also struggled with feeling loved herself. She was abandoned at a young age, and then adopted by her grandmother, and then raised. So she had a lot of issues of her own, a lot of abandonment, and a lot of not feeling valued and loved. So I just remember us going through a lot of different boyfriends, and for her, you know, she had lots of different men in and out of our lives, boyfriends and people that she tried to make herself feel loved with, you know, and most of the time they weren't great guys. Like I said, we lived on a rough side of town, and we were on the poorer side, so the people that she brought in weren't always the greatest. And I just remember from a young age just helping raise my sisters and cleaning people's, you know, like weird people's houses at random times to try to help bring food, and you know, sometimes even stealing to try to get things. You know, just we struggled. My mom, like I said, she struggled with seeing her worth. So she, with the different guys that she brought in, and a couple of them ended up being on drugs. My mom actually struggled with addiction a lot of her life. She struggled with meth use and crack use and different drugs, different substances that she tried to use to try to fill the voids that she had and the things that she carried. And at the age of 9 or 10, I started smoking like cigarettes and just kind of, you know, being just a bad kid. I watched my mom do it. She was the cool mom, you know. She still let us drink at home and stuff. She'd say, I'd rather you do it here than do it somewhere else. But my mom, with her struggle of feeling loved, the people that she brought around us weren't great. And one of those people being one of her boyfriends, he sexually abused my sister and I for 4 years. I won't go into detail about his name because I know this video is going to make it back to my hometown, and that man ended up doing a prison sentence of 10 years, so I'll put that out in the beginning. He ended up being prosecuted for the things that he did to our family. But my older sister was the one who was sexually abused also, and this happened for about 4 years. The actual, like, there were things that he did before that were just not appropriate, but the full-on like I'll just say the full-on rapes started happening at the age of 11, and then happened until I was about 14. And my sister also went through these things, and I remember growing up and we're going through those times, and I remember I would hear the creaking on the stairs, you know, and when he would be coming up, and he would go to my sister's room first, and then I knew that he was coming to my room. And after a few years, my sister, she couldn't take it, and she ended up moving away to Texas, to her father's. And when she left, I just remember thinking, like, man, that's one less room he's gonna stop at, you know? And I had baby sisters that were twins that I helped raise. Like I said, my mom struggled, and I was like mini mom, you know? I loved them so much, and somehow in my mind I justified that I was protecting them, because I remember him going from my sister's room to my room, and then once my sister was gone, all I could think was my little sisters are next, you know? So I felt like I was carrying this burden for them. And I remember once, whenever I was in grade school, 4th or 5th grade, another girl, Terry, I'm sure you'll watch this, I remember speaking out and I sat a group of girls down, and I had not been actually physically raped yet. I had just been, he had just done some things that were inappropriate and said some things that were inappropriate. And I just remember thinking that it wasn't safe, you know, that this wasn't okay. And I sat some girls down, and I talked to them, and I said, look, this guy, you know, my mom's boyfriend, he said these things to me, you know, did these things to me, and I don't know what to do. You guys can't tell anyone, you know, but I just feel like I'm supposed to tell someone. Well, I mean, luckily that one of my friends, she went home and she told her mom, and her mom actually couldn't even stand me at the time, because like I said, I was a bad kid. I got in trouble, I ran around, I, you know, didn't make the best choices even then. But she told her mom, and her mom called DCFS, and DCFS, Child Protective Services, came, and they asked me if these things were true that they had said. And about a few weeks prior to that, I had also told my babysitter, and I couldn't say the words, I just wrote them. And when I wrote them on a piece of paper, she took me over to my mom's work. My mom was working with handicapped people at the time at this little home, and she took me over there, and my mom she was pretty in love with this guy, you know, and he had her blinded between the drugs and the love and the feeling needed. And I remember the lady giving the paper to my mom, and then my mom calling me up to talk to her. And then my mom called her boyfriend over. We lived a few blocks away, and I remember him riding up, I'll never forget, riding up on this old bike with the handlebars that went around, you know, and the really thin tire. And I just remember him riding up on that bike, and then us being at the end of the lane of the facility where my mom was working at the time. And I just remember her showing him the paper and just looking, and we were all standing there. I was right in front of him, and I just remember her looking at him and saying, "Is this true? Did you do this?" And he looked at me, and he looked at her, and he said, "No, she's lying. She's lying. She's just mad because she got in trouble recently. She's mad because I spanked her. She's mad, and she just doesn't want us to be together." And my mom looked at him, and she said, "Okay." And he went home, and my babysitter left me there at my mom's job. And I remember walking home with my mom that night from her work, and I remember her stopping me in the alley by this little produce place by our house, and I remember her looking me in my face and saying, "Don't you want me to be happy? Don't you want me to be loved?" And I just remember thinking, of course I do. Of course I want you to be happy. Of course I want you to be loved. I've watched you struggle to be loved your whole life. And I was young, like I said, 4th or 5th grade, probably 4th grade. And then I knew in that moment that he had won, you know, that the guy, he had won that time. And we ended up back at home, and my mom, we kind of brushed it under the rug. So that friend that I had told at school a couple weeks later, when she went home and told her mom, and they called Child Protective Services, they came and they talked to me, and they said, "Is this happening? Is this true?" You know, and I just remember telling them, no, it didn't happen. I recanted my story, and I said that it wasn't true, because I felt like my mom didn't believe me, and like I had exaggerated things, and like that maybe I I had encouraged it in some way, like there was something that I did or wore or acted or some way that that had caused him to do that, you know, because if my mom didn't believe and if it wasn't a big deal, you know, then that I shouldn't say it. And then so anyways, DCFS came, they talked to my mom, the case was closed, and about 6 months later, he started just, my mom lost control. Her drug addiction spiraled out of control. She wasn't sleeping, she wasn't eating. This guy was verbally abusive, mentally abusive. I mean, it was a very, very toxic relationship, but my mom was so far lost on the drugs at the time that she didn't really know much else. So for the next 4 years, there was a cycle of very severe sexual and mental abuse. I remember at one point this man even put a gun to my little sister's head. My mom would be asleep because she wouldn't sleep for months or for weeks at a time. You know, she'd be up and then she would go into like a psychosis, because when you don't sleep, that's what happens from these really severe drugs. And when she would sleep, she would just crash, you know, and she would just sleep for a long time. And I just remember there were points whenever he even so much as, you know, put a gun, a stolen gun that he put it to one of my little sister's heads when they were sleeping. And I remember him telling me like that if I didn't do these acts for him, these things that he wanted me to do, you know, that he would always throw in my face like, your mom didn't believe you before, she's not going to believe you now, you know. And he was so gone on drugs himself and such a psychosis himself that the things he did were so bizarre and just radical. I mean, he was just so sketchy, you know. But I just remember him threatening me with my sisters, and I remember my mom at this point, a drug addiction had taken over, you know, and the people that hung out at our house, the people that she fluented with, the people that came over, it was a lot of addiction, it was a lot of violence, it was a lot of really unhealthy things. And I remember thinking that I was protecting my sisters, because I remember being so hurt by my sister for leaving, because I felt like she knew what was going on and she left anyways to protect herself. And I just remember like I couldn't do that. I couldn't leave my sisters, my little sisters there, and think of the thought of them going through this also. So sorry, that light's driving me nuts. But I remember after a few years of these things going on, well, during these times, I said I wasn't a great kid before that. I made bad choices before that. I would, you know, like steal from the gas station, and, you know, I had a very poverty mindset, just like, and I was selfish, you know. But at a young age, I remember smoking cigarettes and smoking weed. Like, my mom was a pot smoker. She smoked weed. That was her thing. We would wake up and, you know, from young, like, I just remember smoking weed and drinking coffee in the mornings. We would pass around a little box and just, like, you know, share weed, and that was normalcy in our house. And then when my mom's drug addiction got really bad and the abuse got really bad, I started taking Xanax at a young age, which is like, it's like an anxiety medicine, and when you take too much of it, it really numbs you. It really helps you to not feel things, and it really, it's a toxic drug if you don't need it. But so I started taking Xanax at the age of 11, and I was already smoking weed and drinking, you know. And so from 11 to 14, the sexual abuse happened, and at the age of 14, I went into, or my 15th birthday, actually, I went into the principal's office at my junior high, and I just walked in there, and I just remember telling him, like, this is going on at my house. I'm being abused by my mom's boyfriend, and he abused me last night, and I'm still wearing the same clothes. And if you don't, I wore the same clothes intentionally. I watched a lot of crime shows. So I just remember telling him, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, if you don't get me help, I'm gonna go home and use the same gun that he put to my sister's head, and I'm gonna kill everybody in the house, because I can't live like this anymore. And they called CPS, and the same woman who had came out years before to talk to me, she came again, and I ended up becoming very close with that lady because she was a great woman. But they started building an underground case against my mom's boyfriend because he also, at the same time as this abuse was going on, they were cooking drugs. They were making drugs in our home, and he had a lot to do with a lot of other situations where drugs were involved and bigger things. So they started taking me. I would walk to school, or however I would get to school at those times, and they would come and pick me up from school, and they would take me to the basement of the sheriff's department. I would write statements. They took me to doctors, and they got medical proof, and they started building this case, this kind of underground case against my mom's boyfriend. And I had already told them that my mom didn't believe me, and that was why I'd recanted my story, because that was a big thing. Like, why would we believe you now, and why should we believe you when you went back on the things that you said before, you know? And I just told them, like, my mom didn't believe me, and I was afraid. And so they built this case up. They brought my sister back from Texas. They got all the evidence together, and then I remember them coming and getting my mom one night from our house, and they sat her down in the basement of the sheriff's department, and they showed her all this evidence, and they said, we're about to start this case. This is going to move forward. This is what's been happening. Either you can be on board with us, or you can be on board with him, and we're going to move forward with this case without you, and that means you're probably going to lose your children. And I just remember my mom looking over at me, and the look in her eyes was just like, just empty, you know? Go upstairs. I love you. I know, you're a good. Go upstairs. Do mommy a favor. Go upstairs and do a video. I need you to be a good listener. Thank you. 1, 2.
And does he have another popsicle?
Not right now. Go upstairs.
Or like another.
Sorry about that. Where was I? Sheriff's department, basement of the sheriff's department. I remember the look on my mom's face, like, oh man, this is real. And my mom was in the peak of her addiction at that point. So it was like a slap in the face to her to find out that these things had been going on, continuing to go on at the depth that they were going on. And then my mom decided at that point that she wanted to get on board with helping them in this case, to try to do what she could to help in this case. And so we went back, and I remember there was a couple of cops that I was just so near and dear to, that they knew me by name, you know, because like I said, I wasn't a great kid at this point. I'm using Xanax. I am running around. I am all over the place, you know. I am lying, stealing, cheating, smoking weed, selling weed. I mean, just you name it, I was doing it at that point, you know, as far as weed and Xanax, and drinking and lying and things like that. So there was a couple of cops that I knew that knew me by name that I was kind of close with, and then they kind of just looked out for me because they knew I was from, you know, that I had a rough life at home, but they also knew that they, you know, had to pick me up for curfew before, or they'd had to pick me up for drinking or whatever. And they sent those 2 cops over to the house. And when we left to go to the basement of the sheriff's department, my mom's boyfriend knew something was up. And it was like he knew something was starting to be uncovered. And they told him that I had gotten in trouble at school. My mom told him, the people told my mom I had gotten in trouble at school, and that they needed my mom to come up and talk. And it was nighttime. I remember it being dark. And so when they took my mom up there, and when they took us up there, and then so when we came back and my mom decided she wanted to be on board with moving forward with this, it had been hours. We sat up there for hours, and when they came up, the police came back without us, and they told him that we were leaving, the boyfriend, and he was at the house, and they got some of our things, and they let my mom go in and get a few things, and It was a very tense situation. I just remember it being so tense. And I remember being in the car, and it was so scary to know that these things had been exposed and that things were moving forward. And so my mom grabbed a few of our things, and we went down to our grandmother's that lived down the street. We went down there to spend the night and to kind of reevaluate what was going to happen, who was going to stay in the house and stuff. That night, the boyfriend trashed the house. I mean, broke TVs, shattered things in the room. I remember our bedroom. I remember when we came home, finding my pit bull just hiding underneath my bedroom that he just demolished, you know. Actually left some inappropriate things. Like, I remember even just disgusting things that he did at the house to some of my things. But moving forward, the case started, and healing started to happen. My mom still struggled, not with drugs. At that point, she started moving forward with recovery also as she moved forward with the case. And that man ended up getting he took a 10-year plea bargain for what he did to us, but that was just the beginning for me. I had so much shame and guilt. I started not only using Xanax by the handfuls, but I started doing anything I could get my hands on. My addiction spiraled out of control. And from the age of 15 to the age of 24, my drug use got really crazy. By the age of 24, I was just a liar and a thief, and I was a prostitute, and I was selling my body and my soul to get a fix because I was a full-on junkie. I started using heroin at the age of 23 or 22. I started using heroin, and it just got worse. I ran around, I slept around, danced around, you name it, I did it. I was the worst kind of sinner. My life just got out of control, and I had been arrested a few times over the course of those years, and one of the times my mom had got clean by that point, and one of the times I had got arrested, I got put on probation, and then I went to go see my mom. I came up to see my mom once to come and bring her some stuff around Christmas time, and I was using in her bathroom, and she came in and she found me caught me using in her bathroom. And when I left, she knew I had a warrant for my arrest because I had broke probation. I had broke some of the rules of the probation, and so I had a probation warrant. And so my mom, she made a really difficult decision, but a decision that she thought was going to save my life. And she called the police, and she said, "This is the kind of vehicle my daughter is in. She's wanted. She has drugs on her person right now, and I need you guys to go and get her. She needs help." And I got pulled over, and I got caught with drugs again, and this time way more severe drugs. They were a controlled substance. So when they didn't have proof of what they were right away, but then I went to jail. I got bonded out, and then I went back home and living my life, just living crazy and trying to just bounce around from probation, trying to just slip through the cracks, however I could, pass drug tests however I could. And then I got a knock on the door, and I was living in Madison. I got a knock on the door, and it was the police. They had tested the drugs that I had got caught with. They were confirmed to be a controlled substance, and I went to jail. And then from jail, I had probation that I had violated, and now been caught with a controlled substance for the second time. I got caught with Xanax before, and then I got caught with heroin the second time in syringes. And so I was in county jail, and I remember it was like a week or two in of being in county jail, and I was so sick. I was so sick. I detoxed on a concrete floor in a jail cell. I remember coming off of drugs, coming down from drugs, just being the sickest I'd ever felt. Like I thought I was sick out when I was out and I was looking for drugs, but no, I got so sick I thought I was gonna die. I wanted to die. So my detox process started and I'm in county jail, and I remember laying on that floor for weeks when they would just come in and they would just slide your food across, and because they'd seen it, they had what's called a protocol. They would give you an anti-diarrhea medicine and a Benadryl is what they would give you so that you could sleep and so that you wouldn't crap yourself all over, because that's what happens when you detox from drugs, the kind of drugs that I was on. And you would shake and you would shiver and you would sweat and you literally felt like you were going to die. And I remember a guy coming in there, one of the officers, when I was detoxing, and I remember him telling me, "How old are you?" He made me get up and he brought me some bleach cleaner and he helped me clean up because I had been laying there just sweating and shivering. And he asked me how old I was, and he told me, he said, "You're better than this." He's like, you can't live like this. Like, I have a daughter your age. You're better than this. And I just remember thinking, like, no, I'm not. Like, you don't know my story. You don't know what I've been through. You know, you don't know the stuff I carry around, the people I've hurt, the shame I have. And my detox process continued, and then as I was in there, I went to court and they offered me prison time. They offered me to go to prison to take a plea deal for my charges, and they told me that it would be a quick, it was called a 61-day turnaround, and then that I would get out and that it would be done. And I just remember, like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I had never been so afraid because I have been using drugs for the last 10 years to mask everything that I felt, you know, and now here I'm been detoxing for weeks, feeling like I'm dying on this floor, and now they're gonna send me to prison. Like, what is really gonna happen? So fast forward, I took that plea deal and I ended up going to prison, and I took a year altogether, and I went there. And when you go into prison, you do what's called intake, and then you are segregated and you're put by yourself, so that way they can make sure that you don't have like diseases and stuff. So you're in with just one other person, and you have to stay there until they get you medically cleared. So I remember my detox was over and all the drugs were out of my system, and I began to feel for the first time in over a decade. I mean, emotions and feelings like nothing I could explain. I mean, I had damaged every relationship I had. I had damaged the relationship with my mom. My mom had gotten sober when the case happened. So I mean, I have 10 years after that of hurting my mom, of stealing from my mom, of lying to my mom, of lying to my sister, stealing from my grandparents. I mean, you name it, I did it. I mean, I slept with people's husbands. I slept around. I lied to people. I stole from people. I robbed people. You name it, I did it. And I started to feel like, and not to mention, I had 4 years of trauma that I lived through, that I had been masking, that I had never dealt with, that I had never talked to anyone about. I remember when I was younger trying to commit suicide before I started using the more severe drugs because I couldn't deal with the things that I was feeling, you know? So here I am 10 years later, and all these feelings are flooding back to me, and they're just so overwhelming. I don't even know what to do with them. And I remember being so cold in this prison cell. I remember being so afraid because I didn't know how long I was going to be there. You're not allowed to have any write-outs at that point. So I'm writing on paper. Please go. I'm writing on the back of my booklet that they give you with your the rules and stuff. I'm like writing on that, writing letters to hopefully be able to send to my family, because you don't get envelopes at that point. So I'm cold and I'm scared. I'm feeling things that I have not felt in a very long time. All of this trauma has come back. I remember just feeling so lost, like I cannot cope with this. I remember looking at the sheets and thinking, I've got to figure out a way to hang myself in here because I can't do this. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel. All I know is drugs. Like, I went from being a kid to being so doped up so I wouldn't have to feel. And I remember being on that floor. I got on the floor, and I just remember this overwhelming feeling of just emotion just flooded me. And I remember my mom used to send me to church on the church bus when I was a little girl, so I knew there was a God, you know. I wanted to believe in him, but I had put him to the back for so long, you know. But I knew I was hopeless, you know. I didn't know how I was going to move forward. I didn't know how to live, you know. And I just remember getting on my knees, and I just remember crying out to God. And I just remember saying, God, if you help me get through this, I promise I'll never go back. If you help me deal with the stuff that I'm feeling, and the pain and the shame and the guilt and the things that I feel, if you help take this, I promise I won't go back. And I got on my knees there, and I cried out to him out of desperation, because it was the only thing I knew to do. And I'd like to tell you that it instantly felt better, and it instantly was gone. But it wasn't. But when I stood up from that prayer, I felt like I could breathe again. It felt easier to carry. And the only thing I had in that room was a King James Bible. And I opened it up, and I started to read. I didn't even understand a lot of it. I had blew off school most of my life, but I knew that when I stood up, things felt lighter. God had taken something. He had made things easier to carry. I started to feel like I could breathe again. I started to not feel so hopeless, and had made that promise to him on that floor that if he took it, if he took any of it, if he just made it to where I could just breathe, if he just made it any easier, I would serve him, I would love him, I wouldn't go back. And so right in that moment, I gave my life to Christ. I promised him that if he came into my heart and he made me be able to breathe again, I would serve him. And I started reading that Bible. And I got in classes, and I reached out to my mom when I could. And I started to mend my relationship with her. And I started to apologize and repent to God for all the people that I had hurt and all the lives that I had helped ruin. I forgave the man who abused me while I was in prison. I went to grief counseling. I got help. I got help for the trauma that I had carried, the guilt and shame and pain that I had carried for so many years. I forgave the man who abused me. I wrote him a letter. I forgave him. I worked on my relationship with my mom. I worked on my relationship with my sisters. I worked on my relationship with myself. But more than anything, I worked on my relationship with God. He started to take that pain away, and day by day, it started to get easier. It started to feel like things had hope again. I could feel. I didn't cut off because my husband just called. But I remember God making things me be able to carry again. Like I could carry on. I could breathe. I didn't feel hopeless anymore. I didn't feel like I needed drugs to be able to get through the day. And I worked on myself in there, and I dealt with my junk, and I apologized to a lot of people, and I put in the work. And with God, that's the only way I did it, because before that I used for over a decade, and the drugs just got more severe, and so did the pain, and so did the things that I had to cover up, you know, and I started needing more and more and more drugs to be able to cover them up and to be able to push on. And that moment with God on that floor and asking Jesus to just help me to breathe again, just help me to deal with this. I tell people whenever I say my testimony, I say I don't cry anymore. Well, I used to not be able to talk about the trauma. I used to not be able to talk about my childhood without being tore up and crying. And now when I talk about it, I don't cry when I talk about that stuff. I talk about it with freedom, knowing that it no longer has control over me. I cry and I get choked up when I think about that moment on that floor, when I think about that moment with God, when he took away that pain, that moment with him, whenever he grabbed down in my heart and he took hold of all that junk I had carried and he took it away. I cry when I talk about that part because there's power in it. There's power in it. And I tell you people this, I get on here and I be vulnerable with people and I expose my testimony, because the Word of God says that there's power in my testimony, and the Word of God says that my testimony can help set other people free. So I want you to know that if you're struggling today, or somebody you know is struggling today with addiction, that there's hope, and that I've been there. I was the worst kind of addict. I was the worst kind of liar and thief, and you name it, I was it. And God met me right there. I thought that I had to get it together first, and then I could come to God, and then I could come back to my family, and then I could come and try to live a right life, but that I had to do it first. That's a lie. That's a lie. God met me on a prison floor, a junkie on a prison floor who had nobody. And he met me right there. I cried out to him and he came. I didn't have to beg and try to get my life right for months and months and months. No, he met me right in my mess. He showed up when I called out for him. As soon as I turned my face and called out to him, I felt his presence. I felt his peace. I felt his love. I felt love that I hadn't felt in so long. I felt whole. Like it wasn't instantaneous that he took it all away, but when I tell you I was able to stand up and have the strength to push forward, I mean it. If you are struggling today with addiction, I'm telling you, you don't have to get it together first. He will meet you right where you're at. All you gotta do is surrender. All you gotta do is cry out to him. My cry was out of desperation. Don't make yours have to be out of desperation. Don't make it have to be out of the fact that you're sitting lost, dying in prison, away from your family. Don't make it have to be like that. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be right now. It can be right in the middle of your mess. He will show up. I'm telling you, take my word for it. If you don't want to do it on your own, reach out to me. Call me. I will pray with you. I will put hands on you and pray over you. I will pray with you, but it won't take me. I can't do it for you. You have to want it. You got to cry out and you got to mean it. You got faith without works is dead. You got to have the faith, and then you got to be willing to put in the work that it takes, because I'm telling you, if you are willing to put in the work and you are willing to surrender, he'll make it possible. He'll make it to where you can walk again and not carry that shame and not carry that guilt and not carry that pain. I carried the worst kinds of pain you could ever imagine, and God took them. He took them. I'm telling you, I got out of prison. I never looked back. I've taken steps back. I'm not perfect. I've taken steps back, and guess what? God's met me right there. As I've taken steps back, he showed up and showed me grace and loved on me and helped pull me through, even when I've taken steps back from him. I have had moments where I have thought, God, I can't do this. Even since then, don't think you won't just become a Christian and everything will just be easy. But I'm telling you, you can take the steps out of the pain and out of the shame and the guilt and the hurt and the cycle that feels like it'll never end when you don't want to keep doing it, but you do because you don't know any other way. He can help you stop that. That's what he does. He's a way maker. He makes a way when it seems like there's no other way. I got out of prison. I surrendered my life to God in prison. I did the work. I started healing, started dealing with the trauma I had dealt with. And I got out and I got into church. I started to feel what it felt like to be around other people who had been broken too and who had been given hope by the Lord. And I served him. I got connected in the church. My husband, he wasn't my husband then. That's a whole nother story that I'll say another time. But let me tell you, God has done a work. God has done a work in us. We met in sin. I was that same lost girl when he found me, when my husband found me. And he brought my mom to see me in prison, loved me through it, and brought my mom to visit me and watched me fight with God, watch me pursue God and fight my way back up. And now I'm married, and we got married on the beach. It was the most beautiful wedding. I wore a white dress and I felt worthy of it. The same girl who felt worthy of never being able to be loved by anybody in the right kind of way I felt worthy to wear that white dress. I came out and I walked into a family that already had a son. My husband, he wasn't my husband then, but he was my husband now. I walked in, there was an 8-year-old boy. I had obligations. I had people who were going to depend on me. And let me tell you what, when I got it taken away, all my guilt and my shame and my pain and all that stuff then. But when it came time and I knew I was coming out and I had to be loyal to one person, I had never done that in my life, let alone have a child that was going to be looking up to me, that was going to be depending on me, that was going to need me to do the right thing. I'm telling you, I came out and I was ready to wing it. I'm like, I don't know if I can do this, God, but I trust you. You took that stuff from me and I trust that you're going to help me do this. And I just said yes. Every day I said yes to God and said no to the other life. I changed the people, places, and things. I didn't talk to any of the same people. I changed my number. I deleted my Facebook, with thousands of beautiful pictures and all the junk, all the contacts, all the people that looked out for me and that were my friends. I let go of it. I changed everything. I said yes to God every day. I moved forward with a relationship that I didn't even know if I was going to be able to do. But you know what? With the help of God, I'm a kick butt mom. I'm a kick butt wife. I raise 3 kids on a daily basis now. I love them all with all of my heart. I birthed a child, y'all. God gave me a child. I got a kid. I got to become a wife. Like, yo, it just still blows my mind sometimes. Like, God, you're too much. So I'm telling you today, I just want to do this testimony to just give somebody hope. I just want to, if only one person watches this and is given hope, then it was worth it. I put off this speaking like this because I was worried about how some people would interpret the things that I would say. I was worried that people would think that I was trying to talk bad on my mom when I told my story, which I don't tell you these things about my mom to make you look bad on her. My mom went to be with the Lord right out, like a couple years after I got out of prison. The week my daughter was born, my mom went to be with the Lord. My mom lost her battle to cancer, and that was one of the hardest things I ever had to see. And I couldn't have done it without God. I couldn't. My mom never got a chance to hold my baby, but she got a chance to see me sober and clean. She got to stand there next to me on the beach, as I said I do to my husband. We both had tears streaming down our face because all those years that she had watched me struggle and watch addiction take my life, she thought she was gonna bury me. She thought I was gonna die in addiction in the streets from a disease, or from being murdered, or from a drug deal gone bad, or from an overdose. I mean, my mom struggled for years of sleepless nights, wondering, and guilt herself because of the things that she knew we went through. But I'm telling you, God is good. He shows up. He gave my mom the peace when she went to heaven. She went knowing that her babies were all in a good place. Man, guys, it's like, it's freeing to even talk about these things. It's freeing. And I was worried that people were gonna think that I was talking bad about my mom because a lot of the people I want to reach are the people from my hometown that are still struggling with addiction. People I love still struggling with addiction, and I know what freedom feels like from it, and I want that for them. I want them to know, not because I want them to know my religion, not because I want them to go to church every Sunday. I don't care if you do the religious acts or not. I care if you surrender your life to God and you taste what that freedom feels like. You taste what it feels like to not carry the junk that you've been carrying your whole life, the things that you don't want to tell anybody, the things you don't want to expose. I care about you letting God take those things. You don't need to be in, I mean, a church will help, a church family will help lift you up and stand by you and love you and support you. But God, man, Jesus, the freedom that he wants to give you, the freedom he gave me, I'm no better than anybody else out there. I'm actually probably lived a worse life than you have, like as far as the things I did that were wrong. And like I said, I didn't have to get it together. First, God met me right where I was, and he brought freedom to my life, and he wants that for you. So if you're struggling today, or somebody you know is struggling, I just wanted to give you hope. Again, my mom was a great person before she died. I don't say any of these things. The people that love my mom, I want you to know I love my mom. I don't say any of the things that we went through to talk bad about her. I say it because it's the baseline of the story, and it's the facts. And I wish it could have been different, you know, but then again, I don't, because I'm grateful for where God brought us to, you know, the things that we went through, that he brought us to where we are. And so my sisters, I love them. I have no resentment towards my sister that left. She left out of protecting herself. She was scared and she was lost and she didn't know what else to do. So when she left, please go upstairs. Please go upstairs. There's one in the drawer. There's one in the drawer. Right underneath the silver, next to the silverware. Sorry, I have a family up there that is like, what are you doing down there for 30 minutes on the phone? But I don't resent my sisters. I have a great relationship with all of my sisters. I have a great relationship with all of the members of my family, even the ones that I did wrong and that I hurt, the one that left to go protect herself. I have a great relationship with them all. And even them, man, I want for them to have a relationship with the Lord more than I want anything else. So even when they see this, man, I love you guys. And God is good. God is able to take the crap that we can't carry anymore. And I just thank you guys. If you took the time to listen to this, I just thank you. And share it if you want. I'm going to get back on. God's been putting it on my heart to speak for a long time. And I just struggled with insecurities of my own, of not wanting to speak for different reasons and timing and things like that. But God's been telling me, like, girl, I didn't wait until you got it together to show up. Why are you hiding my story? I went to other countries. I went to Haiti and told my testimony to people, to strangers. But for some reason I struggled with, and I've said it in my church, around, my church people. I've done it there once, but I struggled with doing it like this. I wanted to go live, but I didn't want the distraction of the comments. So I'm gonna merge these two videos together from when I got a phone call and it stopped, and then I'm gonna merge them together and hopefully just have one long video. But if you took the time to watch this, man, I love you and God loves you and He has a calling and a purpose for your life. You were not created to just live on this earth and live in pain and to live in guilt and to live for yourself in all these selfish ways. That's not what we were created for, man. God has an abundant life for you, and He wants that for you. And so I'm just calling people out, man. The time is now. We are going through these unprecedented times right now where people need hope. So if you have a testimony, if you have a story, and we all do, we all have a story, but if you have a story of what Jesus has done for you and the things He's brought you through, man, share it. We live in a time right now where people need hope more than ever. Addiction and overdose is at an all-time high. Abuse at an all-time high. If you have a testimony of God's goodness, share it. Step out on faith. Share it, even if one person hears it and they're given hope and they're given a chance to breathe again, like I said, man, then it's worth it. So I just thank you guys. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I thank you for sharing. Or man, it feels like a breath of fresh air to be able to get all that out. I thank you for the people that have encouraged me. I thank you, God, for just giving me the strength and giving me this life and loving me enough to bring me through the things you brought me through and trusting me with this story so that I could use it to help others. I just love y'all. Have a blessed day.